Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Launchpad. I'm your host, Dave Kluge, and today I am joined with Adam Koffler from Rotoballer and Aaron Larson from the Fantasy Footballers. We're going to be talking about some sleepers today, guys that you can draft outside of the top 80 that have huge potential for upside. We're going to talk about Trevor Lawrence and Daniel Jones possibly being top 12 quarterbacks this year. What about Robert Woods rebounding at age 30, coming off the ACL tear, but having a sky-high ceiling over in Tennessee? We're going to talk about a ton of huge options today that can help you win your fantasy league, so be sure to check this episode out. Who is your favorite player right now to draft outside of the top 80? That and so much more on today's episode of The Launchpad. Aaron, why don't you go ahead and start us off? Who is a guy right now getting drafted outside of the top 80 that you just cannot get enough of?
Yeah, so we talked about this on Twitter beforehand a little bit. It's Allen Lazard, wide receiver 1 for the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers' top wide receiver coming into this season. I don't know why he's outside the top 80. Rodgers does not have a great history with rookies, and he's got this chemistry built in with Lazard. It doesn't have that with Sammy Watkins, doesn't have that with the rookies. Sure, he's got it with Randall Cobb, but Cobb is on the downhill trajectory of his career at this point. And Lazard has been awesome at scoring touchdowns and just at getting fantasy points, racking them up as he makes catches. He had 3.06 fantasy points per reception last year. That only trailed Jamar Chase and Gabe Davis. So pretty good at racking up those points, and he should see more of those receptions this season.
Yeah, I mean, he's an efficiency monster. One of the stats that really jumped out to me is that Aaron Rodgers, when targeting Allen Lazard, had the 6th highest passer rating of any quarterback wide receiver duo. But I think the one thing that really kind of gets me excited, and this isn't numbers based at all, it's just when you try to think schematically of what this Green Bay Packers offense is going to look like. You know everybody that's on this depth chart, but who can fill in that X role? Allen Lazard is really the only guy. I mean, you're not going to see Sammy Watkins playing that at this age in his career. Randall Cobb's going to be playing out of the slot. Christian Watson just doesn't have the skill set right now to run those routes. He's probably going to be playing that flanker role that was vacated by MBS. I mean, you go down the depth chart all the way through. Allen Lazard is the only guy that's going to be able to play that X role. So he's going to be the primary read on a lot of these plays. So, Aaron, I know you and I, we've both been on the Allen Lazard train all offseason. So glad you got a chance to plug him there. But Adam, same question to you. Who's a guy right now getting drafted outside of the top 80 that you just keep smashing in your drafts?
It's got to be Chase Edmonds, man. He's got such an opportunity in Miami. Listen, Mike McDaniel moved from San Francisco to Miami. He was the run game coordinator in San Francisco. Any running back succeeded in San Francisco. Anybody that played the workhorse roles really saw success. Elijah Mitchell, Deebo Samuel, anybody. And Chase Edmonds is really underrated running back in terms of like his explosiveness. He had the 15. What was it? 15% of his runs went for 10 yards or more in 2021. Like he's up there in the upper echelon of guys who could just pop long runs. And here's something from Connor Allen of 4for4 Football. He tweeted this a little while ago. The 49ers used zone blocking the sixth most in the NFL last season, and Chase Edmonds in zone blocking runs, EPA per play was first, and yards per attempt was 5.8, which was also first. So Chase Edmonds is probably going to succeed in this Mike McDaniel offense. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are going to really open up the field. And I think we see a lot of success coming from Chase Edmonds, a guy who they paid $10.2 million guaranteed over Raheem Mostert and Sony Michel, who they're only paying $1 million guaranteed. So if money talks, and we're going to find success from one of these running backs in Miami, it's most likely going to be Chase Edmonds. And at that price tag, I mean, he's been able to succeed and be a points per game RB2-ish the last 2 seasons in Arizona. So I'd expect that's his floor, and we could see a ceiling of a top 15 guy, especially in a PPR league.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to push back a little bit here, playing devil's advocate. I agree with the sentiment that there is going to be gold to be found in this Miami Dolphins backfield, but it has been so hard to predict how Kyle Shanahan is going to deploy his running backs. And I don't know if I can be 100% certain that it's going to be Chase Edmonds. The one guy that I'm putting my chips on, and it sounds crazy because this guy is just an oft-injured 30-year-old, but Raheem Mostert, he's got the familiarity with the offense. He's got that high-end speed where he can really rip off chunk plays. And we've never seen him put together a full season, but when he's out there, he's explosive. I agree, though, that there is going to be somebody, whether it's Sony Michel or Chase Edmonds or Raheem Mostert. I'm just kind of taking a shotgun approach and drafting all of them in different drafts and hoping that one of them ends up hitting. Before we get into introductions, though, I want to talk about one guy that I keep drafting, and that is Khalil Herbert. And I'm trying not to, let my fandom get in the way here, obviously being a Bears fan. But, we saw over the last few years, David Montgomery is one of those guys that's kind of good at everything, but not great at anything specifically. And that's kind of exactly what Khalil Herbert is, but he's just slightly better at everything. When you look at almost every efficiency metric from last year, Khalil Herbert basically outplayed David Montgomery. And now I'm going to go right down narrative street here. I don't have any advanced metrics to back this up, but David Montgomery is in the final year of his rookie deal. There's a brand new coaching staff in there. They've got about $130 million in salary cap next year. Wouldn't it make sense for them to get some touches going Khalil Herbert's way, just to kind of see what they've got in him? This team doesn't want to commit a lot of money while they're, pretty much in the middle of a rebuild. They're not going to want to commit money to David Montgomery on a second contract. So where last year, David Montgomery was the workhorse, and in the year before and the year before that, Khalil Herbert kind of took on this role as an elite handcuff last year. I think that we're going to see much more of a split this year than people are prepared for. So because of that, I'm, again, not trying to let my Bears fandom get in the way here, but I am much higher on Khalil Herbert and much lower on David Montgomery than the consensus. You guys have anything to add about Khalil Herbert?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So I don't think it's just your Bears fandom here as the Packer fan in the house now. But speaking of that, the Bears' new offensive coordinator, Luke Getsy from Green Bay, we've seen him do this, multiple running back by committee with Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon. And the Packers, even before that, it was always Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams. I can totally see Herbert just cutting into that and just earning more time on the field, maybe being a little bit more of a committee. And then, as you touched on, if something does happen to Montgomery, then, Herbert becomes possibly a league winner.
Yeah, I completely agree. Adam, what do you have to add about Herbert? Am I looking through this, through navy and orange colored glasses, or am I not? Am I onto something here?
No, I mean the lack of options on this offense just screams more work for a second running back. Like much like we're probably going to see in Green Bay, like Aaron mentioned, and also in Dallas, you expect to see Tony Pollard get the rock a little bit more with some of those pass catching options no longer there, hurt. Start the season. We could see something similar with Khalil Herbert in Chicago. And again, he's going like RB 55 to 60 range. If anything happens to David Montgomery, Khalil Herbert becomes like a back end RB1, high end RB2.
Yeah.
And there's just at that cheap of a price, like I want to draft Khalil Herbert in almost every league.
Yeah. I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent here, but Zach Cruz, Packers beat reporter, just yesterday said that he expects Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon to combine for 500 or more touches next year. I mean, if that's the situation where these guys are going to be combining for 500 touches, we are entirely too low on both of them. But anyway, let's get into introductions here, and then we can talk some more fantasy football. I want to thank everybody for tuning into episode 36 of The Launchpad, now on the Footballguys channel. So if you haven't already subscribed to this podcast, you can find that anywhere podcasts can be found. Just search Dave Kluge, The Launchpad, Footballguys. You'll be able to find it pretty easily. We're going to be pulling this off of the Audible stream and onto its own stream. Also, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Footballguys YouTube page. That's youtube.com/footballguys, where you can see this show, you can see my best ball show, you can see the mailbag show, and then you can also see all the other shows that we have to offer, like the Audible and the DFS Power Grid, the Dynasty Newsletter show, and so much more. Last week, I was joined with Scott Fish and Bob Lung. We talked about, you'd bet it, or you'd guess it, the Scott Fish Bowl and the Fantasy Football Expo. And today we are going back to the roots with fantasy football. I'm joined with Adam Koffler and Aaron Larson. And all we are going to be talking about today are some deep sleepers that you can get in your fantasy football draft. So Adam Koffler, you have been on the show before. Longtime friend here. You are exclusively over at Rotoballer now. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, let everyone know where they can find you on social media and what you're going to be working on this offseason.
Yep. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me on. Like you said, all my stuff's over at Rotoballer. Find me on Twitter quite often. And throughout the offseason, or at least for the rest of the offseason, I'll be publishing some PPR rankings over at Rotoballer, and also just some, random articles on a, probably bi-weekly basis that talk about sleepers and players to avoid and mid-round guys that you want to target. And then obviously things like this, like, guys that you can get after the ADP of 80 or 100 or whatever. And so anything and everything to get you ready for your drafts come, the August timeframe for redraft.
Absolutely. And Adam is a very fun follow on Twitter, so be sure to follow him at Adam Koffler. And then on the right side of my screen, I am joined with Aaron Larson, who is over at the Fantasy Footballers. Now, before you introduce yourself, I just want to let the audience know this is a somewhat like sentimental show for the three of us. When we all got into the industry years and years and years ago, we all worked together over at Fantasy Pros on their news desk. So these are two of my oldest connections in the industry. I'm thrilled to have us all together on one show. This should be a ton of fun. But Aaron, over at the Fantasy Footballers, let everyone know where they can find you on social media, what articles, content, anything that you are going to be working on this offseason.
Yeah, so for the offseason right now, we have a lot of fun article series that go up with the Fantasy Footballers. A lot of path to wide receiver 1 articles going up where we take some guys that are ranked outside of that range and examine what would it take. So for instance, I just put one up on Gabriel Davis the other day. Like, what would it actually take for him to get into that top 12 wide receiver finish for the season? AJ Brown, I think there's probably getting close to 10, 11 in those articles between the staff put up there now. So those are fun. We have a couple more article series that will just be going up throughout the summer through July and August. And then still trying to figure out our schedule for the regular season, but I'll have a weekly article there as well when the regular season hits. But yep, that's where all my written content is at the moment, is the Fantasy Footballers.
And Aaron also, a very fun follow on Twitter, big into best ball. So we do quite a few drafts together. And here we are 10 minutes into the show, and we've already talked about Alan Lazard and Gabriel Davis. Realistically, we could probably do a full hour just on those two, probably two of the most polarizing guys right now in fantasy football. But let's not waste any more time with introductions, getting to know each other. Let's go ahead and dive into the meat and potatoes of the show. Adam, fire one off at us. Who is another guy that you have ranked outside, that the consensus is drafting outside of the top 80 that you think is a great deal?
I love running backs who catch passes, run routes, get all the targets. Give me Nyheim Hines. And I think his stock is so much lower going into this season than it was going into 2021. Because of the year that we saw from Jonathan Taylor, of course, in 2021, when he had, a whopping, 83 red zone touches. So it's really interesting. Nyheim Hines handled actually 30% of the Colts red zone carries in 2020. So just 2 years removed from handling 30% of the Colts red zone carries. And last season, that number dipped to just 4.7% because of the season that Jonathan Taylor had. Like that's insane. You're not going to see the same kind of workload for Jonathan Taylor. Frank Reich has already said that they ran a little bit more than they wanted to last season. It's just how things were going with the Colts and not being able to trust Carson Wentz. Obviously, we're in a completely different situation this season with Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan does like to check down to his running back, so I could see Nyheim Hines getting back up there in the 15, 16, routes run per game, as opposed to in 2021, it was just at like 10 point, or it was 11.2 in 2021. So we're definitely going to see Nyheim Hines probably run a couple more routes. So far in OTAs, we've seen that he has been working with the wide receivers, so that's a positive for his value. And if you look at Hines just in the last few years, he's done the best when he's played with a pocket passer. In 2021, he averaged 6.6 PPR points per game with Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz likes to run. He's out of the pocket, dancing around a little bit. In 2020, he averaged 12.1 PPR points per game with Philip Rivers, almost double what he averaged in 2021 with Carson Wentz. And then the year before that with Jakobi Brissett. Jakobi Brissett actually runs a little bit more than people would expect. He had just 3 less rush attempts than Carson Wentz, and Nyheim Hines averaged only 7.4 PPR points per game this in 2019. So I expect that number to get up closer to like the 10 range, 10 plus. And when Jonathan Taylor, played his rookie season, when he played those couple games that was under 30% snap share, it frustrated a lot of people that season. Nyheim Hines was like a back end RB1 in PPR. So I think you're getting flex appeal, and you're getting a really high end handcuff if anything happens to Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, this one almost feels like a no-brainer. I mean, I can't believe that Nyheim Hines' value is as low as it is right now. Like you said, when he has a pocket passer, we saw it 2 years ago with Philip Rivers, he finished the season as the RB15 in PPR leagues. And now, Carson Wentz checks down at one of the lowest rates in the league. There's no real clear-cut wide receiver 2 on this team behind Michael Pittman. It wouldn't surprise me one bit if Nyheim Hines is number 2 on the team in targets. I mean, he's a fantastic pass catcher. They're going to find ways to get him out in space. So I am fully aboard on this. People are, just beating the drum for Jonathan Taylor, as they should be. But I think that there's, enough versatility between these two backs that they can coexist and both put up pretty good numbers in fantasy football. So I like that call out. Aaron, over to you. Who's a guy that you are drafting outside of the top 80?
So I'll just stick with the running backs now. And for me, it's Devin Singletary. Like, I get it. They drafted a rookie, but the way that he finished the season last year, down the last 5 weeks to end the season, the only person that scored more fantasy points, only running back that scored more, was Rashard Penny. And we know how hot he finished the season. But yeah, Devin Singletary, over that 5-game pace, he, was averaging 75 yards a game, and he was scoring a touchdown every game, 22 yards through the air at that clip. So, he was basically a league winner himself, and he is going outside of the top 100 right now, RB 34 by ADP. I can't see a world where he finishes worse than that. Like, he is still going to be the lead back. I know James Cook is there. James Cook is going to have a role. But it reminds me kind of the Washington Commanders, right? They actually tried to get J.D. McKissick. Well, let's look last year at where Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissick were. Gibson finished as a much better running back. And right now, everybody is way, way down on Gibson, and probably rightfully so with McKissick back and Robinson there now. Gibson is still going 40 picks ahead of Singletary, at least on Underdog, which seems just ridiculous on both accounts. You got to tell me which offense is better, the Commanders or the Buffalo Bills with Josh Allen. So I know that Josh Allen is going to take some of that work on the ground near the red zone and the goal line, and I know that James Cook is going to be worked in the passing game. But with how good Devin Singletary was to end the season last year, and honestly, he did good in the actual NFL playoffs too. So he's still going to be the lead back in a high-scoring offense. Running back 34 just seems like a screaming steal to me there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm waiting for you guys to, talk about somebody that I don't agree with all that much, because I am completely in on Devin Singletary as well. Like you said, I mean, he's just the lead back on an explosive offense. What is there not to like about Devin Singletary? We saw his ceiling at the end of the year. I'm not concerned about James Cook. I feel like this time of year, there's always these weird discrepancies in the market where the dynasty crowd is really plugged in and they pump up the values of rookies much more than they should be. But make no mistake about it, I think Devin Singletary is the guy here. Adam, you look like you got something to say. Do you want to add on to the Devin Singletary talk?
Yeah, so I'm pumping the brakes a little bit on Devin Singletary. And Larson, you mentioned one thing, right? Josh Allen's the RB1 in Buffalo. That's fine. Devin Singletary probably still gets his. However, like, James Cook is so much better than Zach Moss and so much better than Matt Breida. So we're looking at a guy behind Devin Singletary now that's no slouch. Buffalo doesn't need a prototypical runner. James Cook could be used far more in the run game than people think based on his usage in college. Like, Buffalo just doesn't, they don't have their running backs run that many routes. If James Cook gets an opportunity, like, he's going to take valuable, touches away from Devin Singletary. And I'd rather have the cheaper of the two guys. And I think that's James Cook right now.
So, I think they're really close.
Yeah. And what I'll add, I think that James Cook landing in Buffalo negatively impacts Josh Allen more than it negatively impacts Devin Singletary. And when you think about it, this team just committed almost $500 million to Josh Allen. And then they go out and they draft a guy who really specializes in pass catching. James Cook isn't a guy that's going to be able to run between the tackles at an NFL level. He is just too small. He will get his butt kicked trying to run between the tackles there. So I think what they're going to try to do is sort of train Josh Allen. Hey, rather than tucking your nose or tucking your chin and running, why don't you try to throw it to this guy that we just drafted for you? So I think that this is more of trying to train him to throw and check down a little bit more than it is, a major indictment on Devin Singletary. I think when it comes to goal line work and early down work, that is still going to be going to Devin Singletary. And again, this is a really ambiguous backfield, and that's why both of their values are so suppressed right now. You see both of these guys going outside the top 80, and I think that there's always value to be found when people get scared off by one of these ambiguous backfields.
What happens when Zach Moss vultures all the touchdowns in Buffalo?
God, I hope not.
We're moving off of Buffalo. Zach Moss is not a thing. I think Zach Moss is more likely to be cut from Buffalo before week 1 than he is to vulture any sort of meaningful work from James Cook and Devin Singletary. All right,
that's not advice, Adam. By the way. That's not advice. That's not advice.
Adam, let's move on to the next one. Who's another guy that you're drafting right now?
So I'm cautiously optimistic on what I'm hearing about Robert Woods so far this offseason. And from everything I'm hearing from the injury experts, based on the videos that they're seeing, is Robert Woods is going to be a full go by training camp. So I'm on board because Robert Woods, he's entering a situation where it's a very ambiguous receiver core. We have no idea what Treylon Burks is going to give us. You got Nick Westbrook-Akina and Austin Hooper there, so it's completely brand new receiving core, for Ryan Tannehill. You figure the Titans aren't going to be as good this season. They're going to have to throw a little bit more than they have thrown in the past. Last season, they threw 31 times per game. Obviously, Derrick Henry missed half the season. The year before that was even less because Derrick Henry did his thing. You figure they're up in the 32, 33, pass attempts per game at a minimum this season. And Robert Woods, prior to last season, when he shared the field with Cooper Kupp, who had a ridiculous wide receiver season, he was a 23, 24% target share kind of guy the previous 3 seasons before that. So if you give him a 23 or 24% target share in Tennessee, even if they only throw 32 or 33 times a game, you're looking at about 130 targets for Robert Woods. Over the course of a 17-game season, that's like 7.5-ish targets per game. Last season, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, DK Metcalf, Michael Pittman were all in that range. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be as good as those guys, but he's going to be on the field a lot because of his run blocking ability. He's the best run blocking wide receiver in football. Mm-hmm. So he's going to be on the field 80, 90, 100% of the snaps. There's going to be too much opportunity for Robert Woods as a veteran, in this Tennessee offense. The thing that concerns me, obviously, is the ACL recovery. We've seen that receivers struggle a little bit coming back from that. He's 30 years old, so I'm pumping the brakes a little bit. But he's like wide receiver 50, so you're not risking that much right now with Robert Woods.
Yeah, I think that Robert Woods, you already hit a lot of the negatives, the things that kind of concern me a little bit. A 30-year-old on a new team, coming off an ACL injury, and a late season ACL injury at that. But like you said, these workout videos, like, it makes no sense. I thought that we were going to see this guy like maybe kind of like getting back to like some jogging towards like the end of camp. And in May, like, there were videos of him running ladders and like just looking like his old self again. So that's definitely something to get excited about. But when I look at the archetype of receiver, I see so much of Robert Woods in Treylon Burks. So I think that, part of the reason that they went out and got Robert Woods was to help develop Treylon Burks a little bit. They have such similar play styles where they're guys that really benefit after the catch, and, he can help him up with some of his run blocking. So I don't know, man. I don't want to push back too hard on this because you made some really good points. But Robert Woods is a guy that I haven't really been drafting too much at ADP. I feel like there are some big red flags there, but like you said, it's an ambiguous wide receiver core where somebody is going to have to step up. And with all of these negative reports coming out about Treylon Burks, why not Robert Woods?
He had almost 90 catches 3 straight seasons before last season.
Yeah, but we're talking about the Los Angeles Rams, which are a haven for fantasy wide receivers. I mean, Odell Beckham went there last year and put up respectable numbers after just being, written off as dead in Cleveland. Now we're going to a run-first team. They ran the second. What was it? Their pass rate was the second lowest last year behind every team except the Eagles. And then they flipped over A.J. Brown. So I think that there's a very good chance this year that the Titans are dead last in pass rate. It could happen, though. It could happen. I'm not completely writing it off.
Just he's so cheap. He just give him a shot. He's so cheap.
Yeah. Who are some of the other guys? I don't know if you've got the ADP pulled up off the top of your head, but let me take a look here. So Robert Woods currently getting drafted as the wide receiver 49. And there's just some other guys that I'm looking at that I keep drafting in that area instead. Sky Moore, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Chris Olave, Chase Claypool, Garrett Wilson, Tyler Boyd. It seems Tyler Boyd's probably where I draw the line, but I think I'm more interested in all of those rookies, given the unknown, given the possible upside, than I would be in Robert Woods, who we kind of know who he is at this point in his career.
You just mentioned dynasty fever, man. You just like all those guys' receiving lines are like 700 and below.
That's a good point.
I get it. Like if Michael Thomas doesn't play, yeah, sure, Chris Olave is gonna skyrocket up rankings, but Sky Moore could be the 4th option in the passing game as a rookie. We have no idea. And Robert Burks is going to be the one.
In all fairness, I said Sky Moore and Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Okay, I'm throwing chips at anybody in Kansas City.
So you got to waste two. You got to waste 2 roster spots then instead of 1.
Right. We have no idea who the wide receiver 1 is going to be in Kansas City next year. But Aaron, did you have anything to add on Robert Woods, or do you want to talk about another guy here?
I'll quick chime in on Woods. I think he is, I think a lot of it depends on how you're building your team and what you're going for. Like, I think he's going to be ultra safe. Like, I can't see a world where he's not leading the Tennessee Titans in targets. And I don't think he's going to have a lot of huge gains. So, this is one of those guys that maybe is not better in best ball, but he might bring some actual safety to your roster and nice floor. So a lot of it comes down to roster construction for me there.
That's a good point. I mean, he's a guy that you could probably plug in as a flex wide receiver 3 option and get a reasonable floor. And I think with best ball, people get so obsessed with upside that that's probably why he's getting pushed down those best ball rankings a little bit.
Here's
I,
here's
I think come
one
redraft season, he'll probably be going a little bit higher.
here's one last argument for Robert Woods. Ryan Tannehill is a low ADOT guy. Robert Woods is a low ADOT guy. So you got two guys that could be on the same page. Robert Woods isn't running these deep routes, but Ryan Tannehill's not throwing that many deep balls either. So there's a chance that he's peppered with targets.
I don't know. Robert Woods, his ADOT went up last year once Matthew Stafford showed up in town. I think a lot of the reason that his ADOT was so low was just a way to kind of mask the inefficiencies that Jared Goff had in the offense. They kind of had to water down the offense a little bit to make it work for Jared Goff, but we saw him downfield a little bit last year. I mean, he's a little bit more versatile than I think that we understand. And he was kind of pigeonholed into that role because of Jared Goff, but just off on a mini tangent here. Can't wait to see what this Rams offense looks like now with what I believe to be an improved wide receiver too in Allen Robinson. Should be a lot of fun. But Aaron, let's talk about your next guy. Who's another guy that you're drafting here?
All right. Well, that's actually a nice segue because I'm going to go with the Rams receiver, but I'm going to go with Van Jefferson. I think this guy is getting totally overlooked right now. The Rams run a ton of 3 wide receiver sets. Jefferson finished, I think, as the wide receiver 35.5 point PPR last season, and it wasn't necessarily the most consistent. He would disappear from time to time in the box score, but he was always out there on the field. He ran, he was top 20 in routes run. Like he was out there, 3 receiver sets, running routes, and he would have big plays. He finished in the top 6. He finished in the top 24 6 times, finished as a top 10 weekly receiver twice. So he's got that ceiling, and he's in a high-powered offense. And we don't talk about this a lot with receivers, but if Cooper Kupp or Robinson miss some time, he's going to be the number 2 target there. So he's getting drafted way late. I've got him at wide receiver 65 right now, and that's on Underdog, where I think he's even more valuable because of that volatility. So I'm scooping him up a lot in best ball drafts, and I like him as the last positional player in a redraft league.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything. Allen Robinson is obviously the guy that I've been banging the drum for pretty hard here. But looking at how I construct my rosters, if for some reason I get sniped on Allen Robinson and I don't get him in the 4th round when I want him, then I'll pivot to Van Jefferson for that exact reason. I think that his ceiling is sky high there. And then just off on another little mini tangent here, like I do so often in my shows, I think that because they ran so many 3 wide receiver sets last year, that's what's got me low-key kind of excited about KJ Osborne this year in Minnesota. With Kevin O'Connell going from the Los Angeles Rams up to Minnesota, I expect them to be running much more 3 wide receiver sets. It's been so, hyper-targeted and funneled right now over the last couple of years through Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. I think this is finally the year where KJ Osborne gets some of those crumbs dropping off the table and gets to eat a little bit in Minnesota. Adam, did you want to add anything here with the Los Angeles Rams, or you got another guy that you want to talk about?
Yeah, so Larson brings up a good point. We don't often think about this with receivers, but if one of Cooper Kupp or Allen Robinson is to go down, you're looking at Van Jefferson as the number 2 receiver, and we saw that Matthew Stafford can elevate 2 receivers in the passing game on a weekly basis. So you could be looking at a wide receiver 2-3 kind of type if one of those guys are to go down. And then you brought up my guy, KJ Osborne. Like, I agree, KJ Osborne's in the same light as Van Jefferson. If anything happens to Thielen or Justin Jefferson, you're looking at KJ Osborne as a weekly, wide receiver 3 valued probably as well. Now, these guys are probably better in best ball because you're likely not starting them if there's no injuries to the top 2 guys. But yeah, they're the wide receiver handcuffs that you're looking for. And then that brings me to my guy, which is Josh Palmer, right? He's the wide receiver. He's the wide receiver.
Like butter, that transition.
Dude, it's incredible. I think those 3 are the guys that I want to target the most at the end of my drafts if we're looking at wide receivers, just because the offenses they're playing on, with the quarterbacks they're playing with, high-powered, offenses with coaches that want to, play up tempo and throw the football. Josh Palmer was, he took over as the wide receiver 3 for the Chargers last season down the stretch. Jalen Guyton's not a guy that they want in there, catching balls. He's just, throw it deep, run a couple deep routes every game. Jalen Guyton was playing way too much in the beginning of the season, and Josh Palmer really didn't get a chance until about week 14. And then in weeks 14, 16, and 18, obviously Keenan Allen and Mike Williams each missed a game, but Palmer saw more than 60% of the snaps. In 3 of those games, he averaged 7.3 targets and over 75 air yards per game and found the end zone in each one of those 3 games. So 15.8 PPR points per game. Not too bad. Like it's a starter. It's a weekly starter. You're obviously not feeling too comfortable about him if there's nothing wrong with Mike Williams or Keenan Allen, but in bye weeks, 5 or 6 teams on a bye week, like that's not bad in a Justin Herbert led offense that attempted 39.6 pass attempts per game and ran 66.4 offensive plays per game. Like they're high powered offense. Brandon Staley goes for more on 4th down than any other coach in the NFL. Those are the offenses that I want my fantasy players tied to is offenses like the Chargers. And anything happens to Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, we're talking about a potential wide receiver too in LA and Josh Palmer.
And even if Mike Williams and Keenan Allen stay healthy all year, let's just call it like it is. I mean, Keenan Allen is 30 years old, and he has been Mr. Reliable his entire career, just cranking out high-level seasons. But he's approaching that age cliff very, very quickly. And I don't think that we're going to see him ripping off these big plays anymore. He's going to be that possession receiver, running the low A-dot, picking up first downs, doing a lot of the dirty work. But this is a high-powered, explosive offense. And if you can have Keenan Allen running those short intermediate routes, and then you got Mike Williams on one side of the field and Josh Palmer on the other side of the field, really just lengthening the field and making those big plays. I think Josh Palmer, even if nothing happens to Williams or Allen, Josh Palmer can have a standalone, very productive season this year. And we're kind of talking about wide receiver 3s on explosive offenses, but every single year it seems like one of those guys steps up. And this year it could be the guys that we've talked about. Maybe Tyler Boyd has a resurgence. Maybe KJ Hamler in the Denver Broncos. I think those high-powered offenses, the wide receiver 3s, are guys that I love targeting late in my drafts for that exact reason.
And listen, and here's another point. This is on the same point with Josh Palmer and the Chargers. Just a quick note on Keenan Allen, like you mentioned, after Josh Palmer took over for Jalen Guyton as a wide receiver 3, like Palmer is going to command more targets than Jalen Guyton just because of his route tree and he's just a better player, I think. Keenan Allen's targets dipped from 10.3 per game to 8.3 per game playing next to Josh Palmer instead of Guyton, and his PPR points per game went from 17.1 to 13.2. So we're drafting Keenan Allen as wide receiver 10, 11, 12. Like that is probably his ceiling this season. Like if Josh Palmer's there and he's playing 75% of the snaps, Keenan Allen's he's still safe. He's still going to get you a lot of targets. You're probably looking at more like a mid-range back end wide receiver 2 for Keenan Allen. I'm not sure that wide receiver 1 top 12 wide receivers in his range of outcomes this season.
Yeah, and I think that everybody is starting to sour on Keenan Allen a little bit for those exact reasons. He didn't have a bad season, but he definitely did show some signs of decline last year. And I don't know if it's officially happened yet, but in the last underdog draft that I did, I was blown away to see Keenan Allen and Mike Williams back to back in ADP. And a lot of that has to do with, wanting to stack with Justin Herbert and wanting the week 17 correlation against the Cincinnati Bengals. So much of that is the reason that these guys are getting their ADPs propped up. But man, I mean, we're almost at the point where Mike Williams is about to pass up Keenan Allen in ADP, which, I mean, might end up making Keenan Allen a bargain if he gets pushed down the board that far. Aaron, let's throw it over to you. Who else would you like to talk about that you see as a solid sleeper this year?
All right, I'm going to stick with a receiver here. And this guy, again, talking about roster construction, he's more in the Robert Woods archetype of I don't think he's going to win you a lot of weeks, but I think he's going to be super safe. And he's going way later than Woods. He's going right around that Van Jefferson area, actually. This is Jakobi Meyers for the Patriots. So he finished last season as the wide receiver 33. He just didn't catch very many touchdowns. I actually thought he only had one. I looked it up. He did actually have 2 touchdowns on the season, which I know we all remember that massive group celebration as a community when he finally got in the end zone. But, Mac Jones, he only threw 22 touchdowns last season. He was a rookie quarterback playing under Bill Belichick. This is down narrative street a little bit maybe, but there's a world where he starts to take the reins off of Mac Jones a little bit. New offensive coordinator. We're really not sure what the offense is going to look like in New England, but I'm pretty sure Jakobi Meyers is still going to be the target leader for that team. He had a 24% target share last season, 23% the year before. So he's as safe as it comes. Maybe he has some positive touchdown regression coming. The Patriots are a good team, And if Mac Jones just improves a little bit and throws 5, 6 more touchdowns, maybe 2 or 3 of those go Meyers' way, and he finishes as a top 30 fantasy wideout.
I feel like this is just like the biggest edge that you can get in fantasy football every single year is getting the guys who didn't catch touchdowns the year before that pulled a heavy target share. And, I just recently, I wrote an article about Cole Kmet, who had 93, 94 touchdowns, or 93 or 94 targets. I can't remember exactly, but he had 0 touchdowns. And, savvy people that are plugged into the fantasy football industry just see that and they think, well, positive regression, of course. He's pulling the target share. He's going to get some targets. But let me tell you, I shared this article on Reddit and every single comment was, you're an idiot. This guy doesn't catch touchdowns. The tight ends, they only do well when they score touchdowns. Why would you want a guy that doesn't catch touchdowns? And that's how people feel about Jakobi Meyers. But like you called out, a 24% target share, that is borderline elite. I mean, that is up there, one of the best that you're going to see among receivers. So I'm with you, man. I mean, the touchdowns weren't there last year, but chase the volume and the touchdowns and the fantasy points will follow.
Guess who people were scared to draft in 2021 because he didn't have enough touchdowns the previous season?
Who was that?
Cooper Kupp had 3 touchdowns. Had 3 touchdowns in 2020.
Yep.
Right, and he was a 5th round pick because people said, well, he doesn't catch touchdowns. It's like, oh, Matthew Stafford's coming to town, but like he doesn't catch touchdowns, so we're staying away from Cooper Kupp. From everything we've heard out of the New England camp so far, coaches and players alike, Mac Jones is the real deal. And this offense looks completely different. If this offense looks completely different from the 22 passing touchdowns he had last season, what if that number goes to 30? What if the number goes to 35? Like, what if, like Larson said, what if they take the reins off of him? Like Jakobi Meyers with that target share and catching 6, 7, 8 touchdowns. I like that a lot. And I'm not into Devontae Parker. I really like the chemistry that Mac Jones and Jakobi Meyers showed last season was really good. So I'm into Jakobi Meyers at his ADP right now too.
Yeah, and if anybody from the New England's Patriots front office is watching this, just find a way to get Jonnu Smith involved, please. Like you guys paid this guy $50 million, freak athlete. Just find a way to get Jonnu Smith going in the offense, please. Anyway, I know you guys each have one more player you'd like to talk about. So Adam, hopefully you save the best for last. Who is the last guy that you would like to talk about?
So it's a quarterback, so it's a little bit boring, but I'm going to go with Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence was this generational, can't miss, bulletproof prospect coming out of Clemson, goes to the Jaguars. Urban Meyer's the head coach. It's a hot mess the entire season. He goes from Marvin Jones, Laviska Shenault, Laquan Treadwell, Jamal Agnew, Tavon Austin, and Urban Meyer to Marvin Jones, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones. Zay Jones is an underrated receiver. He's better than people think.
Yes, he is.
Evan Engram, underrated. He played for Joe Judge and Jason Garrett the last 2 seasons, but he was a really, really good tight end and a good prospect as well. Travis Etienne, his running back in college, and Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson had some pretty good years in Philadelphia, didn't he? All right,
yeah,
and he had some.
He pulled out some of the best of Carson Wentz.
Carson Wentz's rookie season was pretty bad. He was also a very good prospect. Carson Wentz was the QB 24 his rookie season. He jumped up to QB 2 overall in 2017. Why can't we see the same thing for Trevor Lawrence in his second year under Doug Peterson? And obviously, maybe it takes 2 years under Doug Peterson to get to that level, but we're going to see some ascension from Trevor Lawrence. Like, they put weapons around him. They signed Brandon Scherf, one of the best guards in football. Trevor Lawrence also has sneaky rushing appeal. He rushed 4.3 times per game as a rookie. Carson Wentz was at 2.9 times per game as a rookie. And then Carson Wentz went up to nearly 5 rushes per game as a second-year quarterback. So we could also see some progression, from Trevor Lawrence in his rush attempts. Maybe he gets up to 6, right? Maybe he goes from 4.3 to 6. And guess who? Justin Fields had 6.4 last season as a rookie, and we consider him this ridiculous dual threat ability. I think we're overlooking Trevor Lawrence, and I tweeted this about a month ago. I think that Trevor Lawrence has top 12 fantasy football quarterback appeal this season.
Yeah, I am fully on board with you this year. I mean, I've been beating the drum for Trevor Lawrence as well, but you just sold me even more than I already was. I might have to take a look at my rankings and see if I can move him up anywhere. I love the comp that you made to Carson Wentz, and I thought about that, but I didn't really dive into the numbers about it. They do have such similar play styles, though. Even with the way that they run with those really long strides where it just seems like they're picking up like 5 yards with every single step that they take. really, really fun comps there. But I love what they did with the additions that they made on offense. And everybody's saying, they overpaid all these guys. Well, they build a lot of outs into the contract, so they aren't locked into anything long term. But I think what they did by giving him just a plethora of slightly above average talent is the way to do it, because you don't want to go out and do what the Miami Dolphins did and spend $120 million on a Tyreek Hill, because if Tyreek Hill doesn't work out and doesn't build that chemistry with Tua, that screws them over for the next decade. So I think that what they did by bringing in Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, they've still got Dan Arnold over there, Zay Jones, like you mentioned, Travis Etienne coming back. They have a lot of different options for him to build chemistry with. And some wide receivers and pass catchers are going to do better with other quarterbacks than with others. But he's got the option to build chemistry with, so many of these different guys. I don't know exactly who the pass catcher is going to be to step up. I'm putting my chips on Evan Ingram, but realistically, it could be anybody there. There are a lot of above average talents that could end up being the guy for Trevor Lawrence. So really, really like that. Everybody's talking about Trey Lance in year 2, Justin Fields in year 2, but don't forget about Trevor Lawrence, the number 1 quarterback in this class.
Listen, like Laviska Shenault, he was everybody's favorite, guy last year, and like he's gonna break out, and he's not. Like he's just not. He's not a good receiver. So last season DJ Chark gets hurt, and Laviska Shenault is forced to be like the wide receiver too. Yep. That's a recipe for disaster. Like clearly Jacksonville also doesn't see that. Like in OTAs, he's working as the punt returner and the kick returner. And they brought in 2 receivers to play alongside Marvin Jones. Laviska Shenault's snap share, like on offense, could be like, I don't know, 30% or something, 40%. So that clearly there's been improvements that have been made. They have actual receivers in the building, a better head coach. There's just so much. There's so much to like about Trevor Lawrence this season.
Yep, I agree with you. And you didn't even make the comparison to Peyton Manning's rookie year. So props for that, because I've seen that way too much already.
That's so long ago, man.
Aaron, do you have a quarterback that you could finish up with? Are you going to go the same route as Adam here to wrap up the show?
Sorry, I cut off for a second there. Am I up?
Yes, you are up. Adam just wrapped up with Trevor Lawrence. Do you have a quarterback that you can talk to us about?
Yeah, I do. And it's scary to throw it out there, because his history to this point has not gone great. But let me just, paint the picture here a little bit of the quarterback who, through the first 4 weeks of the season last year, was the quarterback 6. And then in week 5, he got a concussion, and he lost his all-star running back, and he lost his top 2 receivers for a couple of weeks. And that's Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones started the year as the quarterback 6 through the first 4 weeks of the season last year. And then week 5, there was a game against the Cowboys where Saquon Barkley freakishly rolled his ankle, and then he got a concussion at the end of the game, ended up missing a week. And then Kenny Golladay was on and off injured all year. Kadarius Toney missed that game after he punched a Cowboy in the face, I believe, in the helmet. And then he missed time with injuries. Like, it was just nothing could go right. And that was in an offense on a team run by Joe Judge and Jason Garrett. So the script could be so much different this year. It's kind of his last chance. But Daniel Jones, we've seen that rushing upside. We've seen that ability. We've seen that ceiling. And now you have kind of a quarterback guru, the guy that is kind of credited with turning around Josh Allen. And not that Daniel Jones is going to have that high of a ceiling, but he should be able to improve. I know they did not pick up his 5th-year contract extension. So, again, it's sort of his last chance. And if there's ever going to be a time, this is it. If Toney and Golladay and Saquon Barkley, I mean, those are fantastic weapons. I know everybody is leaving Kenny Golladay for dead. That's another guy that I think where you have to draft him is absolutely no risk. I kind of sneakily like him as well. But all of it adds up to Daniel Jones being able to, be he might be in that top 12 quarterback talk. He might have that ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, his upside is immense. You already talked about the rushing a little bit, but, everybody likes to dog on the Giants because they're the Giants and they're, they're an easy target. Let's call it like it is. But when you take a look at that offense, Saquon Barkley, Kenny Golladay, Kadarius Toney, you didn't even mention Sterling Shepard, Wan'Dale Robinson. I mean, there are so many playmakers on this offense that it's really easy to envision him taking that step forward. And like you said, with this being the last year of his deal, you better believe he's hungry, because if he face plants this year, that could be the end of the road for him in the NFL. But if he ends up doing well enough, he can get an extension to stay with the Giants, or he can command a contract in free agency this offseason. So I think there are a lot of reasons to get excited about Daniel Jones. Guys, I got to say, when I have people on my shows, my favorite thing to do is disagree with them, because I think it just makes for good content when you can go back and forth and push back on each other. And I didn't really have many disagreements. I think you guys really threw some LA oops up there that were pretty easy. Had a blast here. Before we go ahead and log off, though, why don't you once again let everyone know where they can find you and what you guys are working on this offseason? Aaron, go ahead and start us off.
Yep. So again, all my written content goes out on the Fantasy Footballers website, doing the wide receiver path to wide receiver 1 series or season series going on right now. We're going to have some other fun ones. We do a fantasy court series always. Then we'll start looking at the divisions specifically and writing guys do the shows. And then as the season gets on, I'll have a weekly piece there with the Fantasy Footballers, and that's you can find me there, and then you can find everything else, just my personal stuff on Twitter at AA Larson.
Awesome. Thank you so much for making the time, Aaron. Adam, same to you. Let everyone know where they can find you and what you're working on.
Yep. Thanks again for having me on, and it's been good chat with you and Larson today. You can find me at Rotoballer. All my written content is there. Pretty active on Twitter as time allows. So during the off season, I'll be putting together some pieces on sleepers, mid-round guys that you should be targeting, PPR targets, things of that nature. During the season, I'll have a series on risers and fallers for each week over at Rotoballer that gets some pretty good traction that I like to, see who's it can kind of lead to some buy low, sell high targets throughout the season and kind of uncover guys that are a little bit more under the radar, but that are seeing good opportunities and can expose some other guys that aren't seeing such good opportunities that we thought would see better an opportunity share. So be on the lookout for that throughout the season.
And that's fun. You're doing the risers and fallers, and I do the ups and downs at Footballguys. So you and I, every week in season, and we never talk about it, but we publish the same article pretty much on the same day in season. And, you can tell that we're friends because a lot of times, we're linked up talking about a lot of the same players every single week. But want to thank everybody that took the time to tune in today. Just a reminder that this show comes out every Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern. You can find that at youtube.com/footballguys or anywhere podcasts can be found. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week. Thank you for watching. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube page at youtube.com/footballguys. On the right side of your screen, you'll see some other videos that we've got right now on our YouTube page that you can check out. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week.